So welcome to UGBS 614 Marketing Management. This is our third lecture, and in today's lecture, we will be looking specifically at laying the grounds for marketing-oriented strategic planning. In essence, we will be looking at marketing strategies and how firms go about planning for them to be able to ensure that overall objectives of the organization are achieved. Now, as usual, there are certain learning outcomes we hope to achieve by the end of our session. And these include, one, to be able to understand the central role of market-oriented strategic planning. The second one is to be able to understand the strategic planning implementation and control process. And then the third one is to be able to understand how strategic planning is carried out at the different levels of the organization. And then finally, to be able to understand how to develop a marketing plan. Now, this final learning outcome is very important because you will need this information to complete your semester assignment, which is a marketing plan. So please pay attention when it gets to this section because you will need the information contained in that particular section discussing the marketing plan to be able to complete your assignment. Now, this assignment is going to be completed in groups of up to 10 members. So by the end of the lecture, we will be able to discuss into more detail the specifics of the assignment and how you're going to go about completing and submitting it. Now, Nama, you said the class is yet to connect. Are you not in 2W1? Please indicate, because from what I know, the class is in 2W1 at the moment. So everyone is connected. So Nanama, you need to clarify. All right, so these are the main learning outcomes that we hope to achieve. They are yet to project. Interesting. Okay, hold on. Welcome to UGBS 614 Marketing Management. Today is our third lecture, and in today's session, we will be looking at laying the grounds for marketing-oriented strategic planning. Now, essentially, we will be looking at the process by which firms go about planning and strategizing, particularly when it comes to executing their marketing activities, in order to be able to ensure that the objectives of the organization are generally achieved. Now, as usual, there are certain learning outcomes that we hope to achieve by the end of the session, and there are 4 of them for this session. The first one is to be able to understand the central role of market-oriented strategic planning. The second one is to be able to understand the strategic planning, implementation, and control process. And then the third one is to be able to understand how strategic planning is carried out at the different levels of the organization. And then finally, you'll be able to understand how to develop a marketing plan. Now, this final learning outcome is very important because you will need the information that you will gather regarding this specific learning outcome to complete your semester assignment, which is the development of a marketing plan. Now, this is going to be done in groups of up to 10 people. So by the end of the lecture, we will be able to have a discussion on how best to go about completing this assignment and submitting it to earn your semester assignment score. So with that said, let's get into the lecture, starting from market-oriented strategic planning and why we should care. Now, market-oriented strategic planning is basically the managerial process of developing and maintaining a viable fit between the organization's objectives, skills, and resources and its changing market opportunities. Now, why is market-oriented strategic planning important? Now, market-oriented strategic planning is important because you will realize that marketing, based on what we learned from one of our previous sessions, is just one of the functional areas of the organization, which works in conjunction with other functional areas like human resources and accounting to be able to come together to achieve the overall objectives of the organization. So for the firm to be able to ensure that the marketing function is performing as it should and playing its role collectively towards achieving this general objective of the organization that we have talked about, the marketing planning process must be cognizant of the overall organizational plan, which includes the organization's objectives, their skills, as well as their resources, all of which have been put together towards achieving a particular end goal in terms of performance, as determined by the top management of the organization. So market-oriented strategic planning is important because it helps us to be able to determine how marketing fits into this general organizational objective that the firm has, and the role that marketing will play towards ensuring that these objectives set by the organization are achieved. Now, when it comes to market-oriented strategic planning, it is a systematic process that involves three main phases. The first one is the identification and assessment of current and likely future resources and distinctive competencies. These are necessary because it is the combination of these resources and competencies that will enable the firm to be able to put in place tactics to achieve the objectives that it has set for itself as an organization, specifically as it relates to the marketing function. Again, the systematic process of market-oriented strategic planning involves the development of objectives and strategies to shape the company's business and products to yield the target profits and growth. Because without having accurate objectives and strategies for each business unit or product of the firm, it would be very difficult to track the performance and progress of these various businesses and products. And without being able to track their performance, you will not know where to allocate resources and competencies, as well as where to be able to augment your efforts in the event that target profits and growth are not being achieved. So the market-oriented strategic planning process also involves the development of these objectives and strategies to help shape the company's business and products in order to yield the target profits and growth. And then finally, the market-oriented strategic planning process involves the implementation and monitoring of detailed marketing programs. Because without the implementation of these marketing programs, the objectives that the firm has in terms of raising revenue towards achieving target profits and growth will not be achieved. And without monitoring, the implementation of these marketing programs may not yield desired results, given that throughout the implementation process, there are certain changes that may occur, particularly from the marketing environment, which we discussed in our previous session, including the micro and macro environment, as well as various changes that may also occur internally within the organization, all of which can affect the implementation process of the marketing program. And because of that, monitoring is necessary to ensure that these marketing programs are able to be implemented without a hitch. So these three phases are basically what the market-oriented strategic planning process involves. So with that understanding, to ensure that firms execute the right activities towards achieving the objectives that are set during this systematic market-oriented strategic planning process that we have talked about, marketers specifically within the organization must prioritize strategic planning in three key areas. The first one is in terms of managing the business as an investment portfolio, because you would realize that several businesses have different arms and units. Sometimes these arms and units are distinguished based on specific firm processes. For other organizations, it is based on specific products. So the firm has to be able to look at its entire business and how they are managing it as an investment portfolio, which could involve, from the marketer's perspective, various processes that are supposed to cumulatively contribute towards a finished product, or various products that are standalone that are supposed to be marketed in their own right to yield certain benefits or profits for the organization. And we realize that various organizations implement different forms of what we have just discussed in terms of managing the business as an investment portfolio. For instance, when we talk of organizations like Unilever and Nestle, you realize that they manage their businesses as an investment portfolio that involves different products, several of which may be competing in the same sector or industry, all of which help the firm to be able to prioritize their planning and allocate resources effectively. Again, marketers must assess the market's growth rate and the company's position in that market. Because without the company knowing their position in the specific market and the growth rate of that market, the company will not be able to determine the exact role that marketing can play to be able to get them to the position that they wish to occupy in this particular market in question. And once they are able to assess the growth rate of the market and they know their position within that market, they can come up with an effective strategy to ensure that they are able to get themselves to the position that they want to occupy in the market, be it as a market leader or having the highest amount of market share or any relevant objective in that regard that will culminate in the achievement of the organization's overall objectives. And hence, the third activity that marketers must prioritize once they are done with the first two sets of activities we have talked about is establishing a strategy. So when it comes to market-oriented strategic planning, these are the three main activities that marketers must prioritize in order to ensure that whatever it is that they are doing as a functional area is contributing ultimately towards achieving the firm's overall objectives. Good. So now that we have an understanding of market-oriented strategic planning and why it's important, let's talk about the central role of strategic planning. Now, strategic planning helps the entire organization to focus on delivering customer value. Because you will agree with me that, like we learned in our previous session, the different functional areas of the organization come together synergistically to be able to play different roles that will culminate in the delivery of value to the customer, which will ultimately yield profit for the organization. Now, aside this, strategic planning also involves organized planning and disbursement of these plans to the various levels of the organization to enable them to be able to respond effectively to the changing needs of these customers that the firm is delivering value to in an effective and efficient manner. Because like we learned in our previous session regarding the micro and macro environment, these two environments are consistently evolving. Likewise, the actors and the factors in these environments. So without strategic planning, the firm and its various functional areas will not be able to keep up with these changes and respond in a timely manner to the effects that these changes might have on their activities as an organization. So strategic planning is necessary so that at any point in time, the various functional areas or levels of the organization are aware of the changes that are taking place and therefore can be able to play their relevant roles effectively to respond to these changes to help the firm continue to deliver the required value to the customer in order to earn profit. Now, in this regard, most large companies or organizations consist of 4 organizational levels. The first level we can talk about is the corporate level, which is usually the corporate headquarters, where you will find a lot of the top management of the organization. Now, they are responsible for designing the corporate strategic plan, which will guide the entire enterprise or all the arms of the organization in their activities. They also, based on this strategic corporate plan that they develop, decide on the amount of resources that are to be allocated to each of the divisions or the arms of the organization. And they are also responsible for deciding which businesses the entire organization is to engage in and which businesses they are supposed to eliminate, depending on how they manage their business as an investment portfolio. So that is corporate headquarters, which is the first and topmost level of the organization. Now, the next step below the corporate level is the divisional level, which establishes the plan covering the allocation of funds to each business unit within their division. Now, that presupposes that every division is made up of specific business units who are responsible for various processes that are supposed to come together ultimately to achieve the goals of the corporate strategic plan as set up by the corporate headquarters, right? So beyond the divisional level, we have the business unit level, where each unit has to develop their own strategic plan to carry out their activities and yield the required profit of their unit, which, like I mentioned, is going to cumulatively come together and contribute towards achieving the overall corporate strategic plan as set out by top management at the corporate level. Now, below the business units, we may also have product levels, where each business unit may have sub-products under each of them. Now, these product levels could be in the form of specific brands, like what we see at Unilever, where each product that they have is a standalone brand that has a separate unit responsible for it, or a product level involving a product line, where specific units are responsible for certain product lines. Now, at the product level is where the marketing plan is developed, because the marketing plan has to be developed specifically towards marketing specific products or services that the organization is responsible for as assigned to each business unit. So the marketing plan comes into play by setting out objectives for each of these individual products or product lines to ensure that value is being delivered to the customers who are the target audience for these different brands and product lines, to be able to bring in the necessary revenue to achieve the profits, which form a huge part of the general objective of the corporate strategic plan. So these are the four main levels of the organization. And as we will see from the strategic planning process, each of these levels of the organization contributes cumulatively towards the achievement of the overall corporate strategic plan as set out by the top management at the headquarters. Now, in speaking on the marketing plan, it is a central instrument for directing and coordinating the marketing efforts. So like I said, you will not be able to effectively design a marketing program for each of these product lines or brands as the business units are responsible for without clearly outlining a marketing plan. Now, as you will learn very soon, the marketing plan has various sections that the organization at the business unit level has to iron out in the form of a written document to clearly communicate not just to the particular business unit responsible for that particular product line or brand, but also to all the other members of the organization regarding where they are planning to go or the actions they are planning to take in terms of marketing that specific brand or product line, so that everyone knows the role that they are playing and what is expected of them. So in that case, the marketing plan operates at both a strategic and tactical level, such that the strategic level of the marketing plan lays out the target markets and the firm's value proposition based on analysis of the best market opportunities. And this level of the marketing plan is usually formulated largely from the perspective of the corporate level of the organization and the divisional level. Whereas the tactical level of the marketing plan specifies the marketing tactics or activities, including product features, promotional elements, merchandising, pricing, sales channels, and service, which are usually done at the divisional level and the business unit level, as well as the product level. And you realize that this aspect of the marketing plan goes into specific details regarding how the actual marketing of that particular brand or product line is going to be carried out. So this is just a general gist of the marketing plan and the role that it plays when it comes to strategic planning and decision-making within the organization. So with this understanding, like I mentioned earlier, each of the levels of the organization that we have talked about, including the corporate level, the divisional level, the business unit level, and the product level, all engage in some form of planning. However, as you will notice from this strategic planning, implementation, and control process model, The arrows at the planning stage indicates that the planning trickles down from the corporate level all the way down to the product level, which means that corporate level decisions are made first, and the divisional planning takes inspiration from corporate level plans. Likewise, business unit planning takes inspiration from divisional level plans, and product planning takes inspiration from business level plans. And all these together, the plans formulated at each of these levels, ultimately contributes towards the implementation and the control process for all these plans set up for the organization at different levels, which are all aimed towards cumulatively achieving the overall objective set out at the corporate level for the entire enterprise. So at the implementation stage, it basically involves organizing and implementing the plans that have been set at each of these levels. And it involves everything from the allocation of resources, including capital, time, human resources, and the utilization of various skills and competencies to ensure that the plans are implemented the way they have been laid out. Now, the control stage involves measuring results, diagnosing results, and taking corrective action. Because like I mentioned earlier, when you are implementing a plan, there is the likelihood that certain changes will be taking place in the micro and macro environment and in the behavior of the various actors and forces at this level. Likewise, within the organization internally as well, certain changes will be going on. And therefore, the control stage of the strategic planning process is necessary so that as the implementation is going on, the measurement of the outcomes of the various activities being undertaken as part of the implementation is being done to enable the firm and the individuals within the firm responsible for these implementation processes to be able to diagnose potential problems or challenges that may arise during the implementation process and take corrective action. And this corrective action, like we can see from the gray arrow at the bottom, could lead to either changes in the implementation process or fundamental changes in the actual plan that's kickstarted the whole process at either the corporate level, the division level, the business level, or the product level. So that is for the various levels of the organization and how the strategic planning, implementation, and control process proceeds as a result of actions taken at each of these levels. Now, at this point, I want to find out if everyone understands what we have discussed so far. If you do, kindly indicate with a thumbs up. If not, and you have a question or something you need clarification on, please use any of the two means we have to make your voice heard, either by using the communication provided in the lecture room or typing your question in the chat. I just got one thumb up. Angela, why the laughing face? Oh, it was a mistake. Okay. A thumb up. Okay. But that is just two people though. So what about the others? Do you all get it? Please indicate with a thumbs up if you understand, because there are about 45 people logged on online at the moment and only 2 people indicated with a thumbs up. So I'm not really sure if everyone gets it. Okay. All right. Good. There's 3 more hands. That's 4. Great. Okay. So at this point, I assume that you understand. So let's move on to specifically break down what happens at the planning stage as identified in the strategic planning, implementation, and control process model. Now, at the corporate and divisional level, when it comes to strategic planning, it involves 4 main activities. The first one is defining the corporate mission, which serves as the guidelines by which all subsequent plans are developed. And then beyond defining the corporate mission, the next activity is to establish strategic business units, which, like we mentioned, are actually involved in carrying out the tactical level activities of a marketing plan that have to do with specific brands and product lines, and how to be able to go about establishing marketing programs to effectively market these products. Now, beyond establishing strategic business units, the next important activity is to assign resources to each of these business units. Because without resources, whatever plans that are set in place by these business units will not be able to see the light of day. So assigning resources to each SBU, as they will be referred to moving forward, being the strategic business units, is a third important activity that is carried out at the corporate level. And then finally, the fourth activity that the corporate headquarters also engages in is in assessing growth opportunities, because you will bear with me that it is not every activity that the firm engages in that results in growth or success. So the firm will have to be able to assess the growth opportunities in each of these units from time to time to determine how to allocate resources effectively and efficiently to each of these units. Okay, so Nanama, what I was saying regarding the SBUs, also known as the strategic business units, is that strategic business units need to be set up to be able to ensure that the tactical activities or the tactical plans that will contribute towards achieving the strategic plans set by the corporate headquarters are effectively put in place and implemented. So without the strategic business units to break down the strategic plan into various tactical activities, there will be no means by which corporate headquarters can be able to ensure that the strategic plan that they set up to cover the overall enterprise or the overall organization is going to be achieved. So the strategic business units basically take the strategic plans that have been set up by the corporate level, and they break it down into specific tactical level plans and activities, which will cumulatively help to achieve the objectives set out in the strategic plan as laid out by corporate headquarters. And I hope you get it now. Great. All right. So we talked about the fact that the first major activity that the corporate level undertakes is defining the corporate mission, right? So in defining the corporate mission, what goes into the process by which the corporate level players, being top management, will define the corporate mission? Now, according to Peter Drucker, there are certain classic questions that a company needs to address in defining their mission. And there are 5 of these, including 1, determining what their business is, who their customer is, what is of value to the customer, because without knowing what is of value to the customer, the firm may not be able to put together a relevant product that would satisfy whatever need the customer has, which they will perceive to be of value. So it's not just enough to know who the customer is. The firm also has to be able to know what is of value to the customer. And once the firm knows what is of value to the customer, they can clearly determine what their business will be, which would inadvertently be in line with delivering this said value to the customer. And finally, the firm should also be able to answer the question, what should our business be? Because the mission is not set for the short term. The mission is set for the long term. Therefore, the firm should be able to determine that in the long term, should any changes in the environment occur, what should their business be at that future date, given all these changes that might occur between now and that future date. So these are the 5 main questions, according to Peter Drucker, that corporations need to answer if they want to define a relevant corporate mission to cover the entire enterprise. Now, these simple sounding questions, however simple they may sound, are paramount to the success of the organization. However, they are among some of the most difficult questions that a company will ever have to answer, right? Because the company going through these various stages, you will bear with me, is very difficult to be able to narrow down. especially when it comes to who the customer is and what is of value to the customer. Likewise, what the firm's business will be at this current point in time or at time T, and what their business should be in the long term, right? However, for a firm to ensure that they can guarantee success along the line between now and the future time, they should be able to successfully answer these questions every now and then. Meaning that the firm cannot just raise the questions at one point in time, get answers, and leave it as that. It's just like the environmental scanning process that we talked about. The firm has to consistently continue to raise and answer these questions if they want to remain relevant and remain profitable into the long term. So this is what the firm must do if they should be able to define a mission that is relevant, not just for the short term, but for the long term, and will help them to maintain their profitability in the marketplace. Now, a good mission statement should first of all be developed collaboratively, meaning that all the various stakeholders who are both directly and indirectly involved in the activities of the organization and either affect or are affected by the activities of the organization need to be involved in the development of the mission statement, either implicitly or explicitly. So in this case, when we are talking about relevant stakeholders, we are referring to everyone from shareholders to investors to employees and to customers. And by doing this, the firm is able to give some kind of shared sense of purpose and responsibility and direction for the organization. Because with their collaborative involvement, each of these stakeholders feels a sense of purpose when it comes to the performance of the organization and feels some kind of responsibility. And for some stakeholders like employees, it gives them some form of direction regarding what is expected of them and how they are to contribute when it comes to the achievement of the firm's overall mission. So good mission statements generally tend to focus on a limited number of goals, meaning that the firm cannot overextend itself by developing a mission that provides several goals that sometimes are beyond the reach of the organization. So when we talk about goals, generally the best way for a firm to formulate excellent goals, which we have established should be limited in number, is by using the SMART acronym, which is one of the most common acronyms that we use when it comes to judging the quality of objectives. So here, the mission statement we are saying must focus on a limited number of goals, which must meet the SMART criterion, meaning they must be specific, they must be measurable, they must be achievable, they must be relevant, and they must be time-bound. Again, good mission statements have to stress the company's major policies and values, because without stressing the major policies and values, stakeholders involved with achieving this mission statement will not know what is permissible and what is not within the confines of the organization and its organizational philosophy. And the organizational philosophy is usually exemplified through their values and the policies that they formulate to guide their activities as an enterprise. So every good mission statement must stress the company's major policies as well as their values. Likewise, a good mission statement must define the major competitive spheres within which the company will operate. Because without defining the major competitive spheres within which the company will operate, when it comes to certain activities regarding the performance of the organization and its growth, for instance, we will discuss very soon about how the firm is able to assess growth opportunities. And this particular aspect of strategic planning involves the firm being able to, where necessary, expand into new areas of business. Now, without having a clear sense of the major competitive spheres within which the company will operate, it will be very difficult for the firm to be able to know how far they can go in terms of this expansion that we are talking about. So a good mission statement would usually define the major competitive spheres within which the company will operate, such that in the event that these expansion opportunities come up and the firm is considering going down such a path, they would be able to know which competitive spheres to limit their expansion activities to per the company's mission statement. Again, the mission statement must take a long-term view because, like I said, it is not just about the firm being able to survive and make profit into the short term, but it is also about the firm being able to survive and exist into the long term, which would guarantee their ability to deliver value to all the stakeholders who are both directly and indirectly involved in their activities, including their investors, their shareholders, their employees, as well as their customers. And finally, good mission statements should be short, memorable, and meaningful, because the longer they are, the more complicated they become and the more layers they have to them, which make it difficult for stakeholders to clearly understand what the mission statement is trying to communicate. And the memorability and meaningfulness of the good mission statement keeps it at the top of mind of all stakeholders who are involved and responsible for various aspects of the mission. And the meaningfulness of it creates a sense of identity and attachment between those responsible for implementing this mission and the mission statement itself, to ensure that the objectives for setting the overall mission statement are ultimately achieved. So those in a nutshell are the characteristics of a good mission statement. Now, once the firm has been able to establish the mission statement, the next activity we talked about is establishing strategic business units, also referred to as SBUs. So moving forward, when you hear the term SBUs, we are talking about strategic business units. So what is a strategic business unit or an SBU? An SBU is a single business or collection of related businesses that can be planned separately from the rest of the company. So you will realize that based on the nature of strategic business units, depending on the number of business units that an organization has, they may have different competitors in different spheres, given that SBUs have their own set of competitors. And because they have their own set of competitors, they have a leader responsible for strategic planning and profit performance for each of these strategic business units. And they are responsible for controlling all the activities of this unit, including the actions and programs, as well as the other factors implemented, which will affect the profitability of these specific business units. And we talked about the fact that based on their nature, strategic business units and their activities and their performance are supposed to culminate synergistically, right? Or come together to contribute towards achieving the overall corporate objective of the organization. So it is important that each of these strategic business units has their own leader responsible for their planning and profit performance to ensure that they stay on track towards achieving these overall organizational objectives that have been set for the entire enterprise. Now, once the strategic business unit has been assigned, for them to be able to engage in these activities of strategic planning and developing marketing programs and performing all the activities necessary to be able to achieve the desired levels of growth and profitability, the corporate level planners have to assign resources to each of these SBUs. Now, when it comes to resource allocation, there is a method that is usually applied because resources cannot be assigned in thin air. They have to be assigned on a particular basis, right? So there are various concepts and models that have been utilized in the past and are still currently being utilized in assigning resources to these SBUs. Now, depending on the model that is being utilized, the criteria that is used to judge which SBU they deserve to get which amount of resources is subjective, right? Now, that being said, previously, there were certain models that were being used. for the purpose of assigning these resources. And these were collectively known as the portfolio planning models, right? And the most popular among these was the BCG Growth Share Matrix. BCG standing for the Boston Consulting Group. So the Boston Consulting Group Growth Share Matrix, like I said, is one of the more popular portfolio planning models that was previously being used to classify the SBUs for the purposes of resource allocation, right? And this method of using portfolio planning models basically assign the resources based on the extent of the competitive advantage of each SBU and the attractiveness of the industry that that particular SBU was performing in, right? So the Boston Consulting Group Growth Share Matrix in particular basically related the relative market share of each business unit to their annual rate of market growth. And the comparison of these two determined the position of each of the strategic business units and the decision of the corporate level management regarding what resource investments to make in each of these SBUs. So the BCG matrix, like I mentioned, considers market growth, be it low or high, in relation to relative market share, also be it low or high. Now, depending on whether the business unit has a high or low relative market share or high or low market growth, they are classified as one of four elements, either as a star, a question mark, a cash cow, or a dog. Now, if the firm was classified as a star, then it meant that they have high market growth and high relative market share, right? Which is the ideal performance level for each SBU, meaning that a significant amount of investment would usually be made to such an SBU because of their high levels of growth and high market share. On the other hand, if they have high levels of growth but low market share, they are categorized as a question mark, right? Meaning that even though they have high levels of market growth, their market share is not growing equivocally. And therefore, it is up to the firm to be able to determine or ascertain whether or not they have the potential of perhaps in the future growing to become a star by achieving a higher level of market share, right? So their investments will be made based on the probability of this question mark growing or expanding in the near future to get to the level of a star, right? Now, for those SBUs with high levels of market share but low levels of market growth are referred to as cash cows, because that means that even though the market is not growing, they still hold a significant amount of the market share, meaning that the firm can be able to milk the resources, the revenue, that they gain from these cash cows and use that revenue to be able to support other business units within the organization. However, if the firm has an SBU with low market growth, as well as low market share, it means that that particular business unit is not doing well at all and does not show any potential or signs of improving in terms of its growth or earning more market share. And therefore, the businesses with such SBUs classified as dogs are in a better position to liquidate or divest these SBUs, right? Or better yet, reposition the products that these SBUs are responsible for to see if they can be able to earn some kind of improved growth or market share, or salvage what is left of this particular SBU for the benefit of the organization. So this, like I said, is one of the portfolio planning models that was traditionally used to determine how resources should be invested and allocated to various SBUs. However, in recent times, these portfolio planning models have been largely critiqued and have fallen out of favor with a lot of major organizations simply because they have been accused of being oversimplified and highly subjective, right? So there was the question of what better or more objective means firms could use to determine which SBUs to invest resources in and which ones to not invest resources in. And therefore, newer models were propounded, which relied mainly on shareholder value analysis and also on whether or not the market value of the company is greater with the SBU or without it. And I believe this is a more objective means as compared with the portfolio planning models and as emphasized in literature, by which firms can determine which SBU should get which resources. Because if an SBU is not contributing and is not making a significant addition in terms of the market value and the shareholder value of the organization, it does not merit the allocation of resources. Likewise, if it is given a lot in terms of its contribution towards the market value of the organization and shareholder value, then indeed it merits additional resources. And I believe this is a more objective allocation of resources as compared with the portfolio planning models. And this is what is emphasized in the marketing literature. So when we talk about these shareholder value analysis and market value predictions, the value calculations basically assess the potential of the business as a whole based on the growth opportunities in each of these SBUs from global expansion, repositioning, or retargeting, and strategic outsourcing, depending on which SBU fits the bill and is relevant for the pursuit of such opportunities that will potentially yield more value for shareholders and for the organization in terms of the customers that they serve. So in assigning resources to each SBU, these are the main discussions that have gone on in literature. And the main take home from this particular section of the discussion is that portfolio planning models, though still in use, have largely fallen out of favor. And shareholder value analysis and market value are the more preferred means by which firms are choosing to determine how to assign resources to each SBU. Now, once they have determined how to go about assigning these resources or allocate these resources, it is important for the firm to be able to assess growth opportunities. Because we talked about the fact that it's not enough for the firm to think about remaining profitable in the short term. You also need to think about the longevity of the firm and being able to survive into the future. So assessing growth opportunities is important, and it includes the firm being able to plan new businesses, and in some instances, downsizing and terminating older businesses. Now, these decisions are not just taken by heart, they are taken with a lot of consideration, thinking about the general effects that it will have on the organization as a whole, and ultimately how it will affect the ability of the organization to achieve the objectives set out in their corporate strategic plan. Now, assessing growth opportunities in the forms that we have talked about, among others, is important because if there is a gap between their future desired sales and projected sales, the firm will have to be able to find a way to close this gap. And remember, we talked about the fact that there may be changes in the environment which make the existence of such gaps inevitable. Likewise, for the firm to be able to survive into the long term, they have to be cognizant of this gap and the source of this gap in order to be able to determine how best to respond to ensure their survival into the long term. So in establishing this gap, which will usually have to do with what they are projecting in the future in terms of sales and what they are currently projecting to receive, corporate management will have to develop or acquire new businesses in order to fill this gap or to achieve the level of sales that they need to gain the level of revenue that they have projected to be able to achieve the level of profitability that they have indicated, right? So in assessing growth opportunities, the firm considers their decisions in terms of this model we have in front of us, which highlights the strategic planning gap. Now, like we mentioned, in the short term, a firm would usually have certain projected sales that they hope to achieve with the current portfolio that they have. Now, projecting into the future, there are certain desired levels of sales that they want to achieve. And if they look at the current sales that they have and the desired sales that they hope to achieve, and there is a gap, they need to find means of filling this gap to ensure that they are able to achieve those desired sales that they are projecting in the future. And there are three main ways by which firms can go about closing the strategic planning gap, which identifies the gap between current projected sales and desired future sales. So from the grid, we can see that the sales in terms of millions of dollars are being compared in terms of time, indicating projected sales at time T being the current time projection and desired sales at a future time, which is several years on. Now, the three main means by which a firm can be able to close the strategic planning gap is either through intensive growth, integrative growth, or diversification growth. Now, let's take each of these one after the other and break them down, starting from intensive growth. Now, if we say a firm is going to engage in intensive growth, it means that they are going to first review their opportunities for improving existing businesses, right? Meaning that they are doing the expansion and the growth, but they are doing it in an intensive manner by using what they already have in terms of business units and product lines and brands. Now, one useful framework by which the firm can be able to determine how to expand by taking advantage of opportunities that they already possess to improve their existing businesses is the product market expansion grid. Now, this product market expansion grid was propounded by a scholar by name Igor Unsolved. So based on his name, the grid is referred to as Unsolved's product market expansion grid. Now, this compares the ability of a firm to expand its market and expand its product base and the various opportunities that exist should they decide to operate in an existing market with an existing product or to operate in a new market with a new product. Now, when it comes to the firm deciding to engage in an existing market with an existing product, they would basically embark on what we refer to as market penetration. And this is where they will start implementing marketing programs that will help them to take a greater share of the existing markets that they have with an existing product that they already have. And this could include everything from relaunching the existing product in the existing market, or increasing awareness of the product, or using some kind of market promotion tactic, like a sales promotion, to be able to increase the penetration of the product in the current market by getting more people to buy it, getting more people to talk about it, right? And that is market penetration. And this is usually the low risk option out of the four options presented by Unsolved's product market expansion grid. However, alternatively, the firm can decide to go into a new market with their existing product, by which means they will be doing what we refer to as market development. And here the firm will be trying to shop their existing product around to new market segments, such that they will try to find a new market or group of customers who will have a need for their product and sell it to them. So that is what we refer to as market development. And this has a medium amount of risk, which is slightly higher as compared to the pursuit of market penetration efforts. Now, beyond that, the firm can decide to expand into design a new product, and sell it to the existing markets that they have. And this is another medium risk activity that the firm can decide to pursue in assessing growth opportunities. And when it comes to product development, it's basically about growing the market by designing new products or extending their existing product lines to be able to sell to existing markets that they are selling in. However, ultimately, the firm could decide to go the high risk route and engage in what we refer to as diversification, where they try to enter into new markets with entirely new products or product lines. And this involves a significant amount of investment on the part of the firm, with higher levels of guaranteed success, hence the high risk nature of the diversification option. So with this product market expansion grid as propounded by Unsolved, we can be able to see the various opportunities that are available to the firm when it comes to intensive growth regarding the existing products that they have and the markets that they serve in, or the new products that they could potentially develop and serve to new markets that they could find or create using intensive growth strategies. Now, the alternative to intensive growth is to be able to use what we refer to as integrative growth, where the business can either decide to increase their sales and profits through backward, forward, or horizontal integration within their industry. Now, when we talk about backward integration, it's about the firm going backward and engaging in more upstream activities involved in creating and producing their product or service to sell to the final consumer. And this could cover everything, including going backwards or upstream to engage in activities that involve the production and distribution of raw materials that are used in producing a particular product or service. Whereas forward integration involves in the firm getting more involved in downstream activities, including activities that are involved in the sales and marketing of the product and service to the final consumer. Alternatively, they could engage in what we refer to as horizontal integration, which involves acquiring competing firms in the same industry or sector in an attempt to expand their market share or increase their sales. So that is what integrative growth entails. Now, alternatively, in assessing growth opportunities, the firm could outright decide to engage in diversification growth, which involves the firm being able to identify good opportunities outside the present businesses that they already engage in, right? And it only makes sense for a firm to diversify into another industry outside of their current business if that particular industry is highly attractive and the company has the right mix of competencies and resources to be able to succeed. Because it doesn't make sense to diversify into a business area that is outside of your present business area if you do not have what it takes to be able to succeed in this new business area that you want to diversify into. So that is for diversification growth. Whereas the firm could decide on a fourth option, which is downsizing and divesting older businesses. And this is where companies will carefully prune, harvest, or divest their tired old businesses. You see businesses doing this all the time, where they decide to retire certain specific brands of product or retire certain product lines or divest them into other means to release the needed resources for other uses in the organization, and sometimes to reduce cost, especially because some of these old businesses may be taking more in terms of resources from the organization than they are introducing back into the organization. So downsizing and divesting of older businesses is the fourth and final option when it comes to assessing growth opportunities by the firm. So with that understanding, when it comes to the planning at strategic business levels, the firm is able to decide how best to utilize these resources that have been allocated to each of these business units. Because remember, we talked about the fact that each business unit has a manager responsible for it, that is responsible for the planning and engaging in marketing programs that will yield the desired levels of performance to contribute towards achieving the firm's overall objectives. So at the business unit level, the strategic planning process involves everything from setting up their own mission, which is based on the overall mission set at the corporate level. Now, this mission would be influenced directly by what we refer to as a SWOT analysis, which we talked about in brief in our previous session when we were discussing the external environment of the organization. Now, the SWOT analysis involves looking at not just the external environment of the organization, but also the internal environment. Now, when it comes to the SWOT analysis, as the acronym represents, the S stands for strengths and the W stands for weaknesses, which are largely determined in the internal environment of the organization. Whereas the O stands for opportunities and the T stands for threats, which are largely determined based on the external environment of the organization. Now, the firm has to be able to clearly determine at the business unit level its internal environment regarding their strengths and weaknesses, because the strengths of the organization will help them to be able to know what they can easily take on, and the weaknesses of the organization will be able to know the potential sources of pitfalls when it comes to implementing their objectives. Whereas the external environment, in terms of the opportunities and threats, determine what threats could likely affect or hamper the organization's activity, opportunity, or ability to achieve its objectives. And opportunities are those situations or events that occur outside the organization, which the organization can be able to piggyback or capitalize on to be able to improve upon their performance as an organization. So once the SWOT analysis is performed and the firm is able to clearly identify its strengths and weaknesses and distinguish between the opportunities and threats, they can then come up with specific goals based on the knowledge they have gained from the SWOT analysis to determine how to go about impacting their performance in a positive manner. Now, these goals end up getting translated into an actual strategy, which is then broken down into a program involving various tactical activities, which are ultimately implemented by actors or employees who are put in charge or made responsible for achieving each of these tactics. And throughout the implementation process, feedback and control is very important to be able to monitor the progress of these activities. Now, depending on how the feedback and the monitoring goes, controlling may be done at the different levels of the strategic planning process as we have identified, including developing the business mission, conducting a SWOT analysis, formulating the goals, formulating the strategies, as well as formulating the programs, and even throughout the implementation process. Because controlling has to be done where things are not progressing as planned to ensure that corrective measures are taking place that will bring the firm back on track towards achieving the objectives that they have set for themselves as an organization. So in a nutshell, this is what happens in terms of strategic planning within the various business units of the organization. So with that understanding, let's go on now and look at the nature and content of a marketing plan, which is one of the main products that is produced at the business unit level, especially when it comes to the products and brands and the product lines that are represented by each of the strategic business units. Now, before I proceed into this discussion on the marketing plan, is there anything that you do not understand or anything that you need clarification on before we proceed? If not, and you are okay with everything that has been discussed so far, kindly indicate with a thumbs up so that I can proceed. If not, and you have a question, please indicate in the chat section. If you also want to ask it, you can indicate and then you will receive the microphone in the lecture room to be able to ask your question. I just saw one person with a thumbs up. But one person is not nearly enough to indicate that you get it. So can you kindly indicate with a thumbs up if you understand? And if you have a question, please type in the chat section and I'll respond accordingly. I'm waiting. I'm still seeing just one thumb up. Please, if you put your thumb up, don't lower it. Keep it there so that I can get a sense of those who are okay. Good. I see 3. I see 4. Okay. 5, 7. Okay. All right. So we're good thus far. You can't talk about integration under diversification. Diversification involves stepping out of your usual line of business. Integration is largely staying within your usual line of business and either moving upstream or downstream or horizontally among your competitors. But diversification involves stepping entirely out of that particular industry or out of that particular sector. So you cannot talk about integration under diversification. I hope you understand now. Good. All right. So with that understanding, let's move into the discussion on the marketing plan. So like I mentioned, at the end of this lecture, you will begin your assignment on developing a marketing plan for a product of your choosing. And when we talk about a marketing plan, it is a written document that summarizes what the marketer has learned about the marketplace and indicates how the firm plans to meet its marketing objectives. Now, the marketing plan presents 2 main benefits for the organization. The first one is that it provides direction and focus for a brand, product, or company, meaning that with the marketing plan clearly set out, the firm is able to have a clear sense of how much resources they are supposed to allocate to marketing activities and in what areas these resources are supposed to be expended. The marketing plan also is able to indicate the projected sales or revenue that these resources that are going to be expended are going to yield. And this is what we say provides good direction and focus for the company in terms of the brand that this marketing plan is designed for, or the product that it is designed for, or the company overall, to be able to help them to get a sense of what to expect from the resources they are expending into the marketing of specific brands or products. Now, aside that, the marketing plan also informs and motivates key constituents inside and outside an organization about its marketing goals and how they need to work together to achieve it. And when we talk about key constituents within the organization, we are referring to all the other functional areas aside the marketing function, all of whom have a role to play. And this marketing plan, providing information and motivation, helps them to know exactly what is expected of them and how to be able to go about achieving it. Likewise, for constituents outside the organization, like shareholders and investors, this marketing plan helps them to be able to understand the marketing goals of the organization and perhaps how much investments they need to make to help the firm be able to achieve these goals and objectives that have been set out in their marketing plan. So when it comes to the marketing plan, these are the 2 key benefits that it provides for the organization. Now, the marketing plan has several sections. Depending on how you decide to develop your marketing plan, you may decide to collapse certain sections into one. However, the ideal marketing plan should contain the following sections, and they should be clearly outlined if it is supposed to provide this direction that we are talking about for the organization. Now, the first part of the marketing plan is the executive summary and the table of contents, which gives us a general gist of what is contained in the entire marketing plan by means of the executive summary. And the table of contents outline how the marketing plan is set out. Now, beyond the executive summary and table of contents, the next section of the marketing plan details the situation analysis. Now, this is where we present the relevant background data from both internal and external research. So internal research will yield background data in the form of previous sales, costs, the markets that the firm serves, its customers, and then externally, we can be able to get relevant background data on our competitors and their products and their sales and their product offering, as well as other actors in the micro and macro environment and the decisions and actions that they are taking, which could affect our marketing plans and objectives. Now, to be able to achieve this, firms will usually use the information that they gather through this background data to perform what we refer to as a SWOT analysis, which I discussed briefly in a few slides ago. Now, SWOT analysis generally refers to the overall evaluation of a company's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, this evaluation is done, like we said, using information gathered from the internal analysis that was performed by way of internal records on sales, markets, customers, costs, as well as external analysis conducted in the micro and macro environment on actors and forces such as competitors, customers, suppliers, government, among others. And through this analysis, the firm is able to identify their strengths and weaknesses, as well as opportunities and threats. Now, the SWOT analysis is a key tool here because without the firm knowing the strengths and weaknesses that they have, they will not be able to develop a marketing plan that enables them to accurately pursue opportunities in the external environment that are fit to their strengths and weaknesses, and also to be able to fortify themselves against threats that will emanate from the external environment, which they may or may not be able to forestall or handle depending on the strengths and weaknesses that they possess. So that being said, strengths are the characteristics of the business which give it advantages over its competitors. And weaknesses are the characteristics of the business which make it disadvantageous relative to its competitors. And then when it comes to opportunities, there are elements in the company's external environment that allow it to formulate and implement strategies to increase profitability. And conversely, threats are elements in the external environment that could endanger the integrity and profitability of the business. So SWOT analysis is very important because without the firm knowing the relevant opportunities and threats and strengths and weaknesses, they will not be able to formulate adequate or accurate marketing objectives that can be effectively and efficiently achieved. So the situation analysis culminates in a SWOT analysis that leads the firm into the next stage, which involves marketing strategy formulation. So this is where the firm begins by defining their mission, right? And these activities are usually undertaken by the marketing manager, who is usually in charge of a particular business unit or particular product or brand. Now, they will usually define the mission. So at the marketing strategy section, the mission for this particular marketing plan and the product or brand that it relates to must be clearly outlined. Likewise, the marketing and financial objectives for that particular product or brand must also be outlined. And the needs that the market offering is intended to satisfy must also be outlined. Because remember, we talked about the fact that whatever the firm offers should be able to provide value to the customer. So the firm clearly outlining the marketing offering and who it is intended to satisfy, or whatever need it is intended to satisfy, highlights the value that it's going to provide to the proposed target audience. Now, the marketing strategy section also defines the competitive positioning of the organization in terms of the products of their competitors and the brands of their competitors and their performance in relation to these competitors. And this would require inputs not just from the marketing function and their research, but also from other functional areas of the organization, such as purchasing, manufacturing, the sales team, finance, and human resources, all of whom will provide valuable inputs and information on the firm's competitive positioning and how best the marketing strategy can be formulated to augment this competitive positioning. Now, once the marketing strategy section is completed, the next section involves marketing tactics. which will break down these marketing strategies that have been formulated into specific tactics and activities. So we say that here the marketing manager will outline the specific marketing activities that will be undertaken by responsible employees for each of these activities in order to execute the marketing strategy. Now, the marketing tactics usually involve decisions and actions taken that revolve around the marketing mix elements. And depending on whether or not it is a service organization or a product manufacturing and selling organization, the firm would utilize either 4 Ps or 7 Ps. Now, the 4 Ps are made up of product, pricing, channel or place, and communication or promotion. Whereas the 7 Ps are the 4 Ps and 3 additional Ps in the form of people, processes, and physical evidence. So I reiterate, the 4 Ps are made up of product, price, channel or place, and communication or promotion. And then the 7 Ps are made up of these 4 Ps and 3 additional Ps in the form of people, processes, and physical evidence. So the marketing tactics will outline each of the firm's tactics and activities as they relate to each of the marketing mix elements, depending on whether it is a service firm or a product manufacturing and selling firm. So there'll be separate subsections on the marketing tactics, which will tell us how the firm intends to go about, for instance, their product design, their pricing, their channel selection, and their communication and promotion activities. Now, once the marketing tactics are outlined, the next section is the financial projections section. And this is a very key section of the marketing plan, given that it is the portion that other functional areas like the accounting and finance functional areas will be looking forward to determine how the activities outlined in this marketing plan are going to ultimately contribute to achieving the firm's bottom line as it relates to sales, growth, and profitability. So this financial projections section will usually include a sales forecast, which will detail the projected sales that that particular unit plans on making using the marketing tactics outlined. It will also include an expense forecast, detailing how much expenses are going to be incurred in performing all the marketing activities that have been outlined, which are purportedly going to contribute towards the unit being able to achieve its marketing objectives and ultimately positively influencing the firm's growth and sales performance, right? And on the revenue side, information under the financial projection section, would include sales volumes forecasted by either month or by year, and the product categories in which these sales volumes are being forecasted, depending on how many products are being covered in the marketing plan. Now, for the purposes of your assignment, the focus would ideally be on one particular product or one particular brand to be able to simplify the process of generating all this information for the various sections. Likewise, on the expense side, the expected costs of marketing the product are broken down into finer categories. So how much is going to be spent on product design, how much is going to be spent on distribution or channel deliveries, how much is going to be spent on place. All of these have to do with how the product is going to get from the manufacturer to the final consumer. And then most importantly, how much is going to be spent on promotions, which is usually the bone of contention between the finance function and the marketing function, because there's usually no easy way of clearly translating the expenses made in terms of promotional activities into actual figures. So it will be very difficult for a marketer or a marketing manager to be able to determine how the amounts they are spending on, for instance, getting a billboard or doing a sales promotion by offering discounts will directly contribute towards increasing sales and revenue, right? However, it is important for these expenses to be stated so that they can be compared against the projected revenues to be able to determine whether the firm is poised to make a profit a loss, or break even. Which brings us to the next important piece of information that has to be included, which is the break-even analysis. Now, this is important because the marketing plan is a projection, which includes projections regarding revenue and expenses. So if based on the planning, it is projected that the firm is going to make a loss in the beginning for the first few months or years, it is important that it is indicated in the marketing plan. Likewise, if the firm is projected to make a profit, it is important to be included. And likewise, if the firm is projected to break even, it is expected to be included, because the marketing plan has to be able to tell the firm how much of the product they are supposed to sell, to be able to ensure that they are able to meet these projections of limiting the period of loss making, if any, or enhancing the chances of earning this profit, or enhancing their chances of being able to break even and ultimately make profit moving forward. So the firm will ideally improve a break-even analysis, because you will agree with me that the marketer would not be comfortable presenting a loss analysis to a firm in the form of a marketing plan. This will only happen on rare occasions. So the break-even analysis is usually what is presented, given that the marketing plan is being implemented for the first time. And at worst, the marketing manager is hoping to at least break even. So the break-even analysis will usually detail how much the firm must sell monthly or weekly, depending on the nature of their projections, to offset their monthly or weekly fixed costs and average per unit variable costs, right? Because without being able to have a clear assessment of this, the firm cannot be able to clearly ascertain how the investments they are making is yielding benefit or yielding profits. So the financial projection section of the marketing plan is very, very important. Now, beyond the financial projection section, the next section is about the implementation and controls section. Now, the reason why the implementation and control section is important is because, like I mentioned earlier, and I will reiterate, implementation is done within a given context. Now, the circumstances within this context are bound to change depending on changes that takes place internally within the organization, as well as other changes that take place externally in the environment of the organization, both at the micro and macro level. So when it comes to implementation, monitoring and control is very important, because there is the need to monitor the ongoing implementation process to identify any shortcomings or pitfalls when it comes to being able to meet specific milestones regarding the implementation of the outlined tactics and activities, which should contribute towards achieving the firm's overall objectives. Now, with this monitoring process comes adjustments, meaning that during the monitoring process, there may be instances where the implementation process may not be moving as smoothly as intended or as planned, based on these changes that I have spoken of. So there is the need for controls to enable relevant adjustments to be made during the implementation process to ensure that the tactical activities and ongoing implementation of these activities are in line towards achieving the objectives that were outlined in the beginning of the plan, right? So typically, the implementation and control section will usually spell out the goals of each month or quarter or week, depending on the level at which the planning is being done, so that management can be able to review the implementation and its progress at each of these periods and the outcomes achieved so far, to be able to identify where lapses have occurred and take corrective action as needed to ensure that all the activities are progressing smoothly towards achieving the overall objectives of the organization. So in essence, the marketing plan that you are going to prepare has 6 sections, starting with the executive summary and table of contents, followed by the situation analysis section, followed by the marketing strategy section, and then the marketing tactics section, moving into the financial projection section, which I have mentioned is very important and pivotal, and then culminating in the implementation and control section, which will give you the complete marketing plan. Now, please bear in mind that in preparing your marketing plan, specifically at the situation analysis stage, if you rely on any form of secondary data to be able to get the background data or information to complete that section, these have to be accurately referenced using the APA referencing style and presented at the end of the marketing plan in the form of a reference list. Now, this is very important because in the event that the final work is submitted without this having been done, and certain forms of secondary data were relied upon, and the proper referencing has not been done, marks will be deducted for such shortcomings. Likewise, I will advise against plagiarism, where members in completing the assignments would take significant sections of other people's renderings of marketing plans and submit as their own. All submissions will be run through the Turnitin plagiarism checker. And students with assignments found falling beyond the acceptable level per University of Ghana standards will be penalized accordingly. So these are the contents of the marketing plan, and you are expected to have each of these sections in the marketing plan that you eventually submit as your assignment. So with that, we've come to the end of today's lecture on laying out strategic marketing plans. So we move into the discussion on the marketing plan. But before we do so, does anyone have any question they want to ask or anything they need clarification on regarding the lecture we just had before we begin discussing the marketing plan assignment? If you are all okay and have no question or anything that you need clarification on, please indicate with a thumbs up, and then we can proceed into the discussion on the marketing plan. I'm waiting. I see only 2 thumbs up. Okay, 4. There's a hand up. Richmond, do you have a question to ask? Or you're just indicating that you have a question? Or you're just... Okay, go ahead, Richmond.
Okay, thank you. The question is regarding to the marketing plan.
Yeah.
I wish could take maybe
your line is breaking. Richmond, your line is breaking. Your line is breaking. I can't hear anything you're saying.
Now we talk about executive summary.
I still can't hear anything. There's a lot of feedback and the line is breaking. Could you type it in the chat section? Or if your line is better, you can speak. Richmond, are you there? Richmond. Richmond, are you there? Okay, I can't hear from Richmond again. Okay. I just want to suggest we do a practical breakdown on the marketing plan where we share ideas starting from the executive summary by soliciting for ideas and ways to put up the entire plan. Richmond, I don't understand what you mean by soliciting for ideas. Okay, so let me take your comments one after the other. You said you want to suggest we do a practical breakdown on the marketing plan. What I just gave you was a practical breakdown on the marketing plan. Now, if what you're asking for is to see a sample of the marketing plan, at the end of chapter 2 in your recommended text, there's a detailed sample of the marketing plan, which breaks down all the different sections I have just talked about. Again, there's another sample of the marketing plan from another textbook, which I am going to share with you. Now, they are all for different products. The one in your recommended textbook is for a sports product, whereas the one I'm going to share with you is for a software product. Now, you will notice that they both present the marketing plan differently. However, all the sections we have talked about are present. So when you pick each of them, you will see the breakdown of how they go about presenting the sections, right? And then you can use that to build yours. Now, what you're talking about in terms of sharing ideas starting from the executive summary, that is the essence of the assignment, for you to learn how to put these together. So I gave you a general overview of each of the sections and what goes into them so that you use that as a guide to look at the different sections and build your own. Now, soliciting for ideas and way to put up the entire plan is the job of you and your group members once you decide who those should be. And I said groups should be 10 members each. Then the section about maybe we could pick a product. Yes, so when you meet with your group members, the 10 of you, you pick a product that you want to develop the marketing plan on. And then you go ahead and decide how you want to structure it by soliciting for the ideas that you talked about and how you want to put up the entire plan. In the past, groups have had their own formula for doing things. However, some group members, by the end of the experience, have various challenges and struggles. So I will encourage everybody who joins a group or is part of a group and is having significant challenges to reach out to me and let me know what these challenges are. Please do not wait until it's presentation time and then you start telling me stories, or it's submission time and somehow the submission of the assignment is not done and then I start hearing stories. I will not listen to any of those stories because you have ample opportunity between now and when the submission is due to bring forward all your complaints for me to help you to address them. So Richmond, I hope by now all your issues have been addressed. And like I said, I will share the sample marketing plan that I have from a different textbook with Ahmed for him to share with you. There's also another sample, like I said, in your recommended text. I do not have an e-version of the text, so I cannot get you a PDF version of the one in the textbook, but I can give you the sample that I have, which is from another textbook, to be able to guide you in developing your marketing plan. So I hope, Richmond, you are okay now. Great. So I have basically addressed almost everything regarding the marketing plan. So it has to be completed in groups of 10. In your course outline, I have clearly depicted how assignments should be presented. Please make sure you follow the guidelines with a cover page, Times New Roman, double spaced, justified text, well structured, pages numbered, sections clearly outlined. These are all things that refer to the proper coherence and structure and formatting that I talk about in the course outline. And please make sure you follow them to be able to ensure that you get the full marks that are due you. Also, plagiarism is a no-no. Please do not plagiarize any person or group of persons' marketing plan and present it as yours. There will be sanctions if this plagiarism is identified. And like I said, all the submissions will be run through the Turnitin plagiarism checker. So in the event there's any plagiarism, it will be unearthed and there will be consequences. So generally, that is what is expected of you when it comes to the marketing plan assignment.